Hi, I'm doing my presentation today on the Yanomami people of South America. My presentation is going to include a bit about their history and culture, but more to do with the effects of colonization and what it's had on the Yanomami people. In this presentation, I'm going to cover the topics of pre-colonial history. So what they were like pre-contact to outsiders. I'm also going to talk about first contact and what happened during that period for the Yanomami tribes. Lastly, I'm going to cover a few of the impacts that colonialism and capitalism has had on the Yanomami people today. This will include issues like health, social, and cultural impacts. My hope is to give a different understanding on what colonization has done to impact Indigenous groups all over the world and how similar a lot of these issues are worldwide. The Yanomami people make up the largest tribe in South America. They live in the Amazon rainforest that borders Brazil and South Venezuela. As seen in this picture, their lands make up the space in the light green area. That is 9.6 million hectares of land in Brazil and 8.2 million hectares in Venezuela. These areas form the largest forested indigenous territory in the world. The Yanomami population is currently between 35,000 and 38,000 people. They live in large circular communal homes that are called llanos or shabonos. These homes hold up to 400 people and many families live in them. The bedroom area and where they prepare food is all together, and the center is open for gatherings, rituals, and for the children to play together. Yanomami believes strongly in equality among people. Each community is independent from others and they do not recognize chiefs. Decisions are made by consensus, frequently after having long debates where everybody has a say. There was an article I read called The Perceptions of America's Native Democracies. Many of the different nations discussed in this article had similar beliefs surrounding democracy. For example, the system on the Huron Nation in North America was rooted in family structure. Leaders of the various clans used public opinion and consensus to shape decisions. I found it very interesting that the indigenous people from completely opposite sides of the world could be structured in such similar ways. Sharing and equality are the most important values to the Yanomami people. Hunters typically don't even eat the meat from their hunt, but instead will share it among the community members. That hunter, though, will never go hungry because the other members will share their food with him. Hunting only accounts for a small portion of their diet, but is considered one of the most prestige jobs among the tribe. Women tend the gardens where they grow around 60 crops, which account for about 80% of their food. They also collect nuts, shellfish, and insect larvae. Wild honey is highly prized, and the Yanomami harvest 15 different kinds. The spirit world is a fundamental part of the Yanomami people's lives. They believe that everything has a spirit, including every rock, tree, and creature. These spirits surround them everywhere, all the time, and every day. And when the spirits are happy, the Yanomami believe that they are to be healthy and provided with plenty of food. When a person in the tribe gets sick, it is believed that an angry spirit has attached onto them. The shamans are the gifted people or spiritual leaders within the tribe who have the ability to talk to these spirits. They do this by inhaling a hallucinogenic snuff called yakuana. First contact. Until the end of the 19th century, the Yanomami only had contact with other neighboring indigenous groups. Between the 1940s and the middle of the 1960s, the opening of some SBI posts and religious missionary groups established the first points of permanent contact within their territory. With them, they brought serious epidemical outbreaks such as whooping cough, measles, and influenzas. These groups were created by the government to try and humanize what they considered wild, savage people. They brought in objects and healthcare services to try and assist with that. However, the Yanomami people, just like the majority of the indigenous groups around the world, including the First Nations of Canada, had no immunity at all to the illnesses and diseases brought in by settlers and missionary groups. But this was only the beginning. What came in the later years could never have been imagined by the Yanomami people. The 1970s. During this period, the military government launched the implementation of development projects, which they called the National Integration Plan. This basically involved the opening of a section of the Northern Perimeter Road, which went right through the Amazon forest that the Yanomami people occupied. In 1975, they detected the existence of important mineral deposits in the region. In 1978, public colonization programs were created, which invaded the southeast areas of the Yanomami lands. This development severely impacted the Yanomami people, and during this time, 2 villages were completely wiped out from diseases. Now we enter into the period of where the gold rush and genocide occurred. In the 1980s, 40,000 Brazilian miners invaded their land. This was the most destructive period of time for the Yanomami tribes. It's estimated that over 20% of the Yanomami population died during this time. Villages were completely destroyed. Conflict arose and many Yanomami people were murdered. Also, the miners exposed them to even more harmful diseases, which again, they had absolutely no immunity to. Utopian ideology, in the context that John Mohawk used in one of his presentations. He states that people have an idea, they have a plan, and according to their plan, a utopian society is at the end of it. But usually, while they're pursuing their goal, there are people standing in their path, or at least occupying grounds needed for them to carry it out. In this case, the gold was seen by the Brazilian people as a way to provide for their family. Many of these gold miners were very, very poor, and mining for gold was like 3 times what they were making at home. So their end goal was to make a lot of money and being able to provide for their families. It didn't matter to them who occupied the land or who was standing in their way. They were going to do it legally or illegally. It didn't matter. John Mohawk also states that episodes of horrific human slaughter and devastation throughout history are often the product of utopian ideologies. To me, that is definitely what we are looking at here with the gold miners and the Yanomami lands. In 1992, Yanomami land in Brazil was finally ruled as a Yanomami park, and the miners were told to leave. I want to talk about some events that unfolded in the 1990s that to me were very significant, not just for the Yanomami people, but it set a precedence for the world. In 1993, a group of miners illegally returned, causing a lot of conflict between them and the occupying tribes. During this time, the miners entered a Yanomami village and brutally murdered the village people, which included the women and children. This at the time got a lot of media attention and created an international outcry of support for the Yanomami people. People wanted to see justice for the slaughter of these village people. A lot of pressure was put on the Brazilian government by humanitarian groups and other world leaders. It's one of the few cases where this has ever happened in the world, but the pressure that was put on the Brazilian government saw these miners put to trial, and they were found guilty of genocide against the Yanomami people. So this was a pretty big deal because it started bringing awareness to Indigenous groups, not just there, but all over the world. And groups and services were created to start trying to protect them, especially the uncontacted tribes of South America. The gold mining has brought a lot of devastation to the Yanomami people. Even though it is illegal, the government has done little to stop them from mining on their land. Today, there are still thousands of gold miners mining in the Amazon rainforests illegally. This is causing havoc on the environment in the area, as well as social and health impacts for the Yanomami people. The reason why the government is doing little to stop this is due to the economic factors, such as the rise of gold prices. The military has come in and shut down many illegal mining operations, but as soon as they leave, more are built. The mining has become so expanded throughout the region that it has become pretty much impossible for the government to control it now. This has created a divide among the Yanomami tribes because they have had so many years of contact with the miners, their whole way of living and knowing has been changed. The Yanomami people have a deep spiritual connection to the land. This is diminishing due to such excessive deforestation, which is happening for large-scale mining operations. They have built airstrips in a few of the areas which were used as hunting grounds for the Yanomami people. This has scared away the game animals, so the Yanomami in that area are no longer able to hunt. The rivers are being polluted and the fish are being poisoned by the mercury levels in the water. Mercury is used by the miners to extract the gold. In a video I recently watched on the Yanomami people being contaminated by mercury, it showed a study that was done in the community of Arcaca. The study showed that 92% of the Yanomami people living in that community have had levels of mercury in their bodies that way exceeded the limit recommended by the World Health Organization. I want to talk about some of the social impacts that the Yanomami have incurred since contact with the miners. Due to the conflict between some of the Yanomami people and the gold miners, there has been health effects, prejudice, and racism. All of these factors contribute to the loss of identity, culture, and traditions, and are threatening the existence of the Yanomami tribes and Indigenous people all over the world, really. Because of the villages being developed for the miners in the area, the Yanomami people have been in close contact with them. This brought in issues of exploitation, such as prostitution. Some of the Yanomami communities started trading with the villages for rice and other items. So what this is doing is, over time, their traditional way of being and understanding has been changed, and it's slowly being lost through the generations. As I stated earlier in this presentation, the Yanomami people have experienced many health effects. A lot of diseases and illnesses were brought in by the miners, and they had zero immunity to any of them. These are diseases such as the measles, tuberculosis, malaria, and influenzas. Even a common cold or flu, they had no immunity to that. The problem is that they are getting these diseases from the miners and the villages in the area, but there aren't enough proper health services established or that they have access to. This has created a health epidemic for the Yanomami people, and their population numbers are dramatically decreasing due to this. In Canada, we've had similar problems happen to the First Nation people. If you look at the Indigenous people living on the reserves, they're also experiencing healthcare discriminations, including not having proper access to healthcare services that they need. I'm coming into the conclusion of this presentation, but first I want to touch on some similarities here. Colonization has shown similar impacts to many Indigenous groups around the world. Again, as John Mohawk stated in one of his presentations, once you believe that one group is better than all the rest, murder is justified. Genocide is justified. In fact, any act against nature is justified. This is the case for the Yanomami people trying to preserve their land from being developed into mining camps. And it's also the case for the First Nations of Canada trying to protect their sacred lands from being exploited for oil. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I want to end with a quote. It can be easy for us to dismiss how events of the past could matter to us here in the present, but studying the history of colonialism, the cultural, emotional, and physical genocide of peoples around the world, reminds us that to understand the injustices of today, we must recognize their connection to injustices of the past.